Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome everyone to Facebook Live. It is June 9th, year 2021. I hope everyone is doing well. I think it's almost warming up here in the United States. We're getting close to summer. Hope everyone is doing well, enjoying the warm weather. We're joined here by some of the members of our panel. Some of the members are out, so they will be back in a few weeks. I think Travis is traveling or something. So there are a few people that are missing. So let's get started with the mini introductions. I don't think I need introductions, but I will go ahead and start with introductions. We have April, who is a psychic and a spiritual teacher. Good evening, April. And then we're joined by Kelly, who is our one and only Qigong teacher and spiritual teacher. Good evening, Kelly. And I think I see Caesar joining. Caesar is a channel and a spiritual teacher. Good evening, Caesar. Right on time. Beautiful. And of course, our incredible Eileen that is going to keep us streamlined. So good evening, everyone. So today, let me look at my phone. I jotted down something. A thought came to me. So it's like, I always say, right, something happens over the week and that becomes the Facebook Q&A. So somehow over the past week, during group meditation, we've been talking about depression, anxiety, all kinds of pain and suffering in general, human pain and suffering, right? So, and then synchronicity is Monday, we got an email from Eckhart where on School of Awakening, and he opens it up with the teacher called suffering, right? So I had this thought, right? So working with all the Facebook group members, people one-on-one, what I've noticed is you know what Eckhart says in this module is a person who does not have a Rolls Royce or a big house or a good job or what have you, right? They don't have anything to be attached to. Then they get attached to their story of their victim identity, right? And it turns into the victimhood, right? So that story repeats over and over again. The question I have for the panel is, do you all feel when you observe your interactions with providing spiritual guidance and counseling services, do you all feel that not only does the victim identity disempower the person, the other disempowerment is that human being is saying, look at me, I've suffered so much, right? I'm the sufferer of a rape or a molestation or a sexual abuse or physical abuse, right? Whatever it may be. Now the world owes me. I have suffered so very much. Now the world owes me. And if y'all remember, Nancy used to pop into the Facebook Q&A. She always called herself a narcissist, right? So does that develop into a narcissistic personality? That thought formation that the world owes me, and all of it stemming from one thing, which is the victim identity, being identified with a disempowering thought formation that says, I'm a sufferer of so-and-so, whatever, fill the blank, right? April, you want to get started? Since you have counseling experience, actually.
Yeah. So you're saying that it's disempowering to believe that I'm a victim, but you're also saying that they're feeling what? Say it again. Poonam, say it again.
So this one part of this empowerment that Eckhart talks about, which we obviously know that the identity, the thought formation, I'm a victim of so and so, and they repeat it, right? They had something, some event happen, traumatic event, and this is trauma. I'm talking about people that may be Palestinian, and women are getting raped, right? They're in Syria, something is happening, whatever they may be, right? In any part of the world. This is not directed to a certain person, or
Right.
it. Not only is that disempowering, but then that victim says, out of their victim identity, feels that the world owes them.
Mhm.
Look at me, I am so miserable.
Yeah.
Right? So now the world owes me, and then they're expecting somebody else to help them because the world owes me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that I do find that quite a bit, where the incident, the situation, it in itself is disempowering. Whatever has happened to them, and it is disempowering at that time. Um, the the key is learning to move forward from that, to heal from that, and move forward, and not stay in it. That's one of the keys. And then the people that I find, like you mentioned, like they repeat their stories. So I have somebody that I can think of that I worked with, and she would often say, it's just not fair. Um, she would say things, and she would yell and maybe complain, and then at the end she'd say, it's just not fair. So this is her victim stance of, some injustice has been done to me, but yet I'm still carrying it. It's 10 years later, and things are not fair to me. And it is disempowering because they stay in that mode and they live life with that lens, with that perception that life is not fair, and it's not fair to me, right? And I think all of us have done this at one point or another, or in some way or some fashion, where we've carried whatever happened to us forward, and it is very disempowering. The freedom for me, again, the freedom for me was when I realized that, number one, how people act has nothing to do with me personally. I still can't tell you how much that our self-esteem is tied up into what other people think, what other people do to us, situations. And when I realized that my worth, my self-esteem doesn't have anything to do with how anybody else treats me or acts to me or what happens, that was one of the bigger freeing moments. The other thing that I did was, the other big freeing moment for me was when I accepted that I am a soul on a soul journey, and everything happens for a reason. And that there is a grand plan, there is a greater scheme. And that scheme, while I really don't like roller coaster rides, never have. I really don't. And while I may not like the ride necessarily, while it's happening, I have faith that in the end, I'm being brought to the perfect destination. I maintain that faith, right? And that's how I have come out of whatever's happened to me, whatever victim mode, how I have gotten rid of, I'm owed something, I'm due something, I should be paid back in some way. Those are the ways that I moved from that.
So how do you, what kind of guidance do you provide such a person that is feeling that the world owes me? So now if somebody, like they called an Uber cab and the Uber person came 10 minutes late, then they're having a fight with the Uber person, right? Because the Uber person was supposed to be on time. So the world owes me, kind of.
Yeah.
Now you're fighting with that person. So
it takes a minute. Like the person that I mentioned where everything was not fair, for me, during one of our conversations, I just flat out said, where'd you get that idea? Where'd you pick that idea up? How long have you had that idea? And most of the time you'll get a lot of resistance or denial. Oh, I don't know. And I said, well, what do you think? 13, 14, maybe 7? When'd you pick that idea up? And if you follow that back, you can figure out what happened with this person in particular is their father died early. So from that point forward, life was not fair. Right. So that's one of the things I do. The other thing I do with people and with myself is, perhaps that driver was late because they needed to be late, because if you were on time, there was a major accident down the road. And it's not, some people say, well, oh, you're just making excuses and you're just buttering things up and trying to make things better. But the reality is you're late for a reason. When you start to get into the energy work, the spiritual work, and you accept that the universe, and it took me a really long time to accept this one because of so much mistrust in my life. The universe is actually not really working against you, right? It's actually working for you. You just need to work with it. So, yeah.
beautiful. Incredible. Thank you so much, April.
Yeah.
The universe is always working in our favor. I don't know if Abraham Hicks says that or Byron Katie. One of them says that, right? The universe is, or the other saying is the universe is happening for us, is the statement. Thank you. Eileen, did something arise in you when I said this? It was something that just popped, like after the group meditation over the weekend. And Monday, I see teacher called Suffering. I listen to his module, and it popped. That look what happens when you're.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of suffering going on over here. Nothing in particular came up for me, but I was also still tagging the members in the group while you were asking the questions. So I only heard April's response, which I was enthralled listening to her response and not really thinking about my own. So I don't think I have anything to add at the moment, but I'm sure that had I heard your initial question, that I probably would. So I might still comment.
Okay, let us know. Just interrupt us as we're going through. Thank you. Kelly, did you want to say something about this wonderful topic? It just popped, that kind of observation.
Well, in Buddhism, suffering is the root of all enlightenment. In Buddhism, you have the Four Noble Truths and the perception of reality. And when you understand that suffering is a result of your attachment, your rigid belief structures in things needing to be a certain way, they have to be a certain way, otherwise life isn't good. And there's lots of layers and permutations to this. The reality is that it's all about being able to feel and understanding what we feel and taking the lessons from what we are feeling. And pain is one of the greatest educators. Pain, if you allow it, can open up doors that are inaccessible otherwise, because pain is usually at the front or standing in front of those doors that we need to step through perceptually, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, to actually understand that we are a lot more than our pain. When pain arises, be it physical, emotion, like when you stub your toe. I mean, that's a very basic, simple example. But, and, you know, even from losing friends, family members, being in accidents, being sick when I was younger, almost dying from my asthma when I was a kid, having certain experiences around pain and around suffering. And I mean, especially with the asthma attacks, there's one that comes to mind. I think I was about 8 or 9, and it was winter, and I had a cold-induced asthma attack, and I just had to, you know, kneel down, not move, and cover my face so that I could heat up the air in my mouth and throat. And it was sort of one of those moments where I had to abandon control. I had to consciously, as a kid, understand that I had no control at that point in time over what my body was doing. I didn't understand that I could have control, that I could actually change the way my body responded to the asthma until later, until after I learned Qigong and started practicing it. But it was one of those moments where I had to abandon the idea that being angry over the situation was going to help. Because in that moment, I understood that being angry that I was having this asthma attack was actually making it worse. And that was a huge life lesson for me when I was, you know, I'm 8 or 9. I'm getting angry. It's like I want to play, you know, with my friends, and it's causing me to have an asthma attack. And what I love to do with my friends is causing me to almost kill myself trying to play. And realizing that I have to let go of that desire to play with my friends and take care of myself and accept what's going on and not get stuck in it, not wallow, not get stuck emotionally, not tense up. That was the really big thing. It's like not tensing up. And it's really hard to do. And even though I had that experience when I was a kid, growing up and having to deal with all of the other mental emotional triggers as a teenager, as an adult, it's always the same thing. It's always been the same thing. Seeing past the attachment to the pain as my identity, seeing past the attachment to the suffering as my identity. When I got divorced, I had friends and family try and project at me that, oh, I was, you know, a broken, unhappy, you know, divorcee and whatnot, and isn't life horrible? And now and I felt none of that. I felt deep relief, and it was a huge revelation to have made that decision for myself, because I was in a very unhealthy relationship. I was in a relationship that was causing suffering, and we were both attached to this idea that we could fix it, and hadn't ever stepped back and just accepted that what we actually understood when we sat down and had the initial conversations is that we understood how different we actually were and how we wanted very different things. And again, this is that communication. When you stop the pattern of being attached and denying and avoiding looking at the pain and avoiding looking at the attachment to the suffering. And again, this is, I'm using my own personal context. And, you know, I realize that I'm very male and I'm very white looking, even though I have Moorish ancestors and a lot of First Nation ancestors. I have been very lucky living the life that I have. I cannot speak to anyone else's personal experience, but suffering is, like every other experience in life, is an opportunity to learn and to become more aware. Every experience in life is about learning to listen to what we feel and to listen to the information that we are experiencing in that moment. And whether or not we are choosing to let ourselves be triggered mentally or emotionally and get carried away and hijacked by the trigger and by the emotional mental energy that comes up with that trigger, or whether or not we choose to step into observation and step into ourselves and into our alignment with our hearts and observe and learn deeper from that experience. So regardless of the situations or the situational circumstances, to me, it's always about the learning. Even you know, when I lost my fingertips on my right hand, I'm actually missing 2 fingertips. I had a little accident when I was 1.
Wow.
So I spent 14 years, pretty much 15, 16 years of my life with these fingertips cracking and bleeding seasonally with the change in moisture in the air and stuff like that. So I'm very familiar with physical pain and the triggers of, you know, feeling physical pain constantly, especially as a kid. And, you know, it was only sort of like in my mid-20s that they actually stopped cracking and bleeding all the time. So I have a very specific point of reference for constant chronic pain that is not sort of debilitating, but that is like an ever-present trigger, and even, you know, even sometimes just scraping them or just lightly tapping them the wrong way will literally take me, you know, to my knees because it's so painful. So they might not crack and bleed, but it's like I'm still constantly aware of what I am doing with these 2 fingers so that I don't bang them accidentally. Anyhow, my 2 cents, nickel or dime or whatever.
Thank you so much, Kelly. What I would say is it's unusual that at 8 or 9 you would have that much of awareness. To say that that shows that you were already developing into that spiritual being that you are right now. If at 8, I mean, it's 8 and 9 children are not that aware that, hey, this is my emotion and this is what I'm feeling. I want to actually go play.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I when I say that I've, you know, I've led a very unique life. I like from a very young age, I was very aware of energy, my emotional content, my triggers, and especially like with the asthma, I had to be super vigilant, and it was like it's just how I am. It's just who I am. Being aware, I had to be aware of what was affecting my asthma and how to not let, you know, getting ticked off that I couldn't go and play with my friends. You know, that would be a trigger that would like make me all tense. And I had to learn at a really young age how to relax my body. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So to repeat for Eileen, what we were talking about is in this module, the teacher called Suffering, Eckhart says that if somebody went through trauma, right, some kind of abuse or some kind of rape, whatever traumatic event, one is the victim identity. They disempower themselves through the victim identity, right, the victimhood. But this, what came to me was leave alone that they are feeling that victim identity. The other disempowering part is that they feel the world owes them. Look at me, I have this badge of honor. I've suffered these 10 things in my life. Now you owe me. So even small events, right? Like they called in an Uber and the Uber driver came late, or they went to a restaurant and the waiter didn't serve them properly. They're yelling at the waiter. Right? It becomes a cantankerous, contentious this thing. So I'll talk to Caesar, and if you have something, Eileen, then let us know, okay? Go ahead, Caesar. Thank you, Kelly.
Well, talk about synchronicities here. Kelly and April literally probably took every word right out of my mouth. And you really described it beautifully. I'm going to switch gears then. So, yeah, the world owes me. Yeah, they're getting paid, all right, constantly. And I think a lot of it has to do with the energy that they are carrying around, because they keep getting more of the stuff to be down and out about. It's a reality that when you are feeling as a victim, well, we know how the law of attraction works, because the universe is going to deliver more stuff for you to feel sorry for about. So a lot of times what I will try to do is to have them raise their vibration, consciously and knowingly, instead of getting out of bed with that victim mentality, as if the world owes them something, to try to create some type of momentum that will raise the vibrational frequency. And that is simply done by being grateful. Okay, what hasn't happened to you instead of what has happened to you? It's the attachment, as Kelly said, and then the expectations of how it should be or how it should have been. Because we know that's ego stuff. When something happens to you, you take it personally, and that allows you to become the victim, instead of, as they both said, extracting the lesson out of your situation. Again, something I always say is I walk with them through their story as they explain it, and then say, now let's leave it there. It doesn't matter if it was an hour ago, and time does heal all, for whatever time is, I guess. But the longer you separate is because you kind of, like, in a sense, forget about it. But that's really stuffing it down in a way. That's not addressing it, as April said, accepting the fact that happened. Once you turn a cucumber into a pickle, you cannot change that pickle back into a cucumber. So again, the goal would be to enlighten them in a sense that they keep attracting what it is they feel. And until they are able to master whatever it is that life was trying to teach them through whatever experience they had, life will continue to offer that lesson in various ways, shapes, and forms and situations until you get it. And if you look at it in that light, well, you can be grateful that life loves you that much. So again, it is about changing the mindset. Abraham says that you cannot get from happy to sad. And that victim mentality, I believe, is a perfect example of that. When you're feeling down and as if the world owes you something because you maintain a victim mentality, how is it possible to even be happy? So you have to look at things, again, Dr. Wayne Dyer, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. So until you can see the light, even just a speck, and feel better about it, knowing that you could put this behind you. One thing I told my daughter when she was 5 years old, when she was, mom told her she couldn't go to her friend's house, and she would come upstairs crying, and I said, just smile and be happy. Do you like being sad? And she would say, no. But how? And I would say, just smile. You don't have to be sad. If you want to be sad, go ahead and cry. How does that feel? And she said, I don't like it. And I would say, well, just smile and be happy. And she said, why? Well, because you can. She's 23 now and still carries that same mentality. I don't think I've ever seen the girl sad for more than a day when something happens to her, but that's a great feeling. So, the bottom line is the disattachment, to get them to unattach to that victim, identity, and release that. It's an occurrence that happened in the past, no matter how long it's been. And the goal would be to get them to, one, accept that is the only way through the pain, is to fully accept it as though you chose it. Acceptance, surrender, forgiveness, all three sides of the same coin. Pick one, whatever one fits your situation. But at some point, you have to. Just like when somebody passes, some people can get over a death in a couple hours, a couple days, a few months, a few years. Some people never do. Christians call it the way of the cross. When it's too much to bear, you just hand it over to God. And one of the ways that you do that is by fully accepting it and trusting that it's over. So yeah, through acceptance, you get through the pain. And if they can start correlating the things that are showing up in their life and relating it to how they felt, that day, then they can start to have a little bit of an idea that this law of attraction thing is real. countless people I've spoke to over the past 6 months in general, where I would say just try it, because there's been a lot of victims that I've been in contact with over the past 6 months specifically. And we would try to create that momentum and just turn the tides a little bit, just by having them wake up and feel grateful and start their day and just smile. And when something interrupts that, to just be conscious of it and don't give it any attention. You know, when something quote unquote bad happens, let's jump back on the happy train, you know, your high flying disc. Don't let that bad thing, you know, gain any momentum. Get back on that gratitude train, you know, that wave that feels good and awesome. And that's by stopping things. Jerry Hicks specified that really well. You know, he was talking about, you know, when things happen, he just stops the momentum. He doesn't allow it to gain any type of momentum. You know, as if a car's at the top of the hill and it starts to roll down the hill. If you stop it real quick, well, it's pretty easy to stop. But if you wait for that thing to gain momentum, you know, middle of the hill or at the bottom, you're in trouble. So it's important to realize when something don't feel good to not give it any attention. What you feed grows. And get back to that place of gratitude, and that becomes a practice. And if you want to create a habit or a routine, let that be it. And then you can start to correlate the things that are showing up in your life. You know, life will offer more stuff to be grateful for, and so on and so forth. And the bottom line is to maintain your presence power, you know, at the end of the day, because this moment is always beautiful and perfect. There is no pain in the present moment. You have to be thinking about, you know, a past occurrence or a possible future occurrence that worries you, to feel that, you know, sadness, to be that victim. Are you a victim right now sitting here talking to us? Probably not. Like Eckhart says, problems are illusions. And if you can tell me one problem you have, if you focus all your attention on the here and now, I want to know. And whatever the answer people come up with, we always say, well, is that you who has a problem with that, or is that your ego saying that shouldn't have happened to me? Chances are it's your ego. Yeah, so the way through is obviously acceptance, and you know, get in the habit, or make, you know, gratitude your practice, and abundance, and things will definitely start to shift for you. And once you get into that habit, you know, be conscious of it, and then it becomes second nature. To want to feel good, you have the capabilities to do that. So you choose to be the victim, and you can also choose to be the happy-go-lucky guy too, if you want to. But it starts with your you know, your thoughts and your feelings. Yeah, it's definitely important to pay attention to your feelings, as Kelly says, for sure. You have to go inside, because all the answers that you seek are within. So that's it. Raise that vibrational frequency, and just be happy. Let it go. Surrender to the isness of it, and get through that pain. And once you do that, every time you think about it, it's going to show back up. Every time you speak about it, it's going to show back up. But once you fully accept it, it's over. Then you can think about it all you want, and not be sad. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Caesar. Awesome. Amazing. So when you said something about everyone has their cross to bear, is that what you said?
Well, the Christians call it the way of the cross.
The way of the cross. Okay.
When things get too much to bear, yes.
I don't remember who the author is. Eckhart actually has this medieval, so he takes a book, right? Like he may take A Course in Miracles and then do a talk with Course of Miracles as his background, right? He'll open the book, read a passage from Course of Miracles, and then speak his teaching as it applies to Course of Miracles. So there's one where he talks about the imitation of Christ. I don't remember the author who it is, and Eckhart uses that book and reads from Imitation of Christ. And this author says, I don't know if it was Meister Eckhart or it was somebody else, but what he says is about this cross, this author says in this book, Imitation of Christ, that if you have a cross, right, which is our pain and suffering of this, whatever state of mind we are in, if we say we want to put it down, what he says in the book, The Imitation of Christ, we will not only is it that we are putting it down, but we'll end up getting a heavier cross to bear, right? If you're trying to shed it, if you're trying, instead of just walking with the cross and bearing the cross, right? Like imagine the sight of Jesus Christ taking the cross and walking it, right? So bearing the cross. So he says, no matter what, you cannot put the cross down, right? And so related to this, and this is something that I've talked about during our group meditation. I don't know if I said this Friday or the Friday before. So one of the metaphysical teachers, along the lines of Jane Roberts, who does the set material, and then Abraham Hicks, right? They are all channel teachings and metaphysical teachers. In the I think she's like late 18, let's say 20th century, right? 1920 or 1943 time frame was Florence Scovel Shinn. And Florence Scovel Shinn says the way to deal with this is to say, I cast my burdens on the Christ within. The affirmation is, I cast my burdens on the Christ within, right? Like if you want to, a challenge comes and now you want the challenge to dissolve. So listening to her, to me, Christ within doesn't really apply, right? So the way I use the affirmation is, and I've had past 3 weeks, I've had like a couple of managers like really rattle right there, irritable, like I can see from their IMs, their energy is irritable, right? So what I do is I look at the IM and I go, I cast my burdens on my inner being, right? And I wouldn't do a single thing, right? Like I wouldn't, like he'd be saying, oh, can you go contact this engineer and make him do this work? Like, and I'm a project manager, right? I'm supposed to be driving work. So can you make him do this work? And I'll just sit back and I'd say, I cast my burden on my inner being. And I sit back, 15, 20 minutes later, I'll see an email from that engineer come through. Oh, I've done this work. This work has been completed. So it is so incredible, the power of our inner being, that alignment, that calibration, that inner being is so powerful, right? And that's what, if anybody's using the affirmation, the Christ within is actually our inner being. That's when I equated, when Florence Scovel Shinn was saying, I cast my burdens on the Christ within, she actually means it's the inner being, and inner being will take care of it. So that's one pointer I had for everyone. I already mentioned it during group meditation. I don't know why we were talking about something and that came through, and I brought up. She has, just like Louise L. Hay, Florence Scovel Shinn, if anybody wants to look up her name on YouTube, there is a person that actually reads her books. She's got a very sweet, like that 20th century, like late 18th, 19th century, 20th century kind of voice, like that old medieval kind of English voice. So the way she reads Florence Scovel Shinn's books is beautiful. So I just got attracted to the voice and started listening to it, just like Abraham Hicks, right? I just listen to it for entertainment. It's not like I'm really following the teaching or anything of that sort. Eileen, did something come up for you as far as,
Yeah.
have you seen people that end up saying the world owes me because I'm such a...
Yeah, and sometimes not even in those exact words, but they'll say things like, well, of course this is going to go wrong. Everything in my life goes wrong. Or why can't something go right? Because everything's always going, So I hear those types of things a lot, which to me is very similar. And Caesar brought up the law of attraction, because as soon as you like restated the question for me, I was like, oh yeah, I have something to share. And then as soon as you started talking, I was like, hey, that's what I was gonna say. Like, if you're, you're constantly even, sorry, even judging others or judging yourself, or feeling like there's some type of expectation, or that someone owes you anything, like you're going to continue to attract those things. And it connected to our Jillian and I's podcast that we had that released today, because our conversation was about self-worth and self-image. And we talked about how people, get their self-worth and their self-image from things that they're from the outside. It's things that they're hearing from others, their conditioning, their, you know, patterns and things that are happening outside. And then they think that this is like who they are. And victim identity is obviously a big one. We didn't necessarily talk in detail about that one, but it's huge. And people truly believe it. And that's what keeps it going. It's those beliefs, and they just attract more of it, manifest it, Um, but then at the same time, that same power exists for the opposite. And so we were talking about that, like the power that we have as humans, like we can manifest the opposite of what we've always believed we are. So she was giving the example of, she was always told that she was shy as a kid. So like she thought that that was who she was. She's like, and as an adult, like, well, I'm shy, so I can't do that, or I won't do that. And she said, and all it took was realizing the power that I had. She's like, and it was, like overnight, you turn into somebody completely different than you ever thought that you were, just from knowing, the power of our belief system. Um, and I know from personal experience, this same thing is true. Like, and I see it. It's just sometimes it's hard when you see it happening with others, because then you want to step in, and you don't want anyone to suffer. So even if you've learned that there really is no, thing to suffer from, it's hard to watch others um, going through it, or truly believing that there is. For example, I know I'm kind of all over the place, but Jillian and I were talking on Facebook. It's probably about a month ago. We were talking about choices, and how, our beliefs and what we, have control over, and that, things can change with just a single choice. And someone had commented and said, well, not those with mental illness, those that are dealing with, anxiety and depression, those things are real, and we don't have a choice. And the person was very upset with us, the conversation that we were having. And she responded really nicely, but I was like, wait, I am an example of all of those things. I've been diagnosed with all of those things, like, yes, it is possible. I'm not saying that people don't have those things, or those things are not real, but what Jillian and I are talking about, like, it is also real, and our belief systems really have great power, negatively or positively.
It's like they want to stay in that victim identity of I'm suffering anxiety, so I'm going to just and not do. I mean, our group, the core group of meditators, and all of you. I mean, they're doing effort. Like they ask questions, they make a shift. They ask another question, they make a shift.
Yes.
Right. So that's amazing about the core group of meditators. Thank you so much, Eileen. As you were speaking, what came to my mind is these type of humans use, oh, he should have done this. Oh, she should have done this. Oh, he should have bought me flowers. It was my birthday. He should have brought me flowers. And then they'll stay all the more in the victim identity. They'll not speak to the person, right? Like if they say, my daughter should have brought me flowers. It was my birthday and she forgot about it. Or my daughter should have called me and the daughter doesn't call you, right? Because you are in your victim, like Caesar says, you're vibrationally vibrating at that victim identity. So your daughter doesn't call you on your birthday, and then then they are furthermore spiral into more victimhood, right? Because now they're saying, oh, she should have called me, or he should have, the guy at the cashier should have smiled at me. Something is wrong with the universe for them, not realizing that my vibrational energy is what is wrong.
Yes, this happened in my house tonight. I was talking to you about that before we even started. Like it literally happened. And I said, well, why do we think this happened? Like, and it's funny because the situation that happened with us, I actually had evidence of, like on my phone. I was like, it is right here. And the person was like, but it's not on my phone. Like I see it's not here. And I'm like thinking in my mind, I can't say out loud, but in my mind, I'm thinking that's because the universe is stepping in and obviously intercepted that, message from going through because of where you are vibrationally, not where I am.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. So let me see. Out of this, there was another. Okay. The next question related to this is, and this is a discussion we had during group meditation as well. So now when we were children, we were seeking approval. We've talked about it. April has said quite a few times that we come from a sense of lack and incompleteness. So we are seeking approval from our parents, right? Then our parent ends up, like what I feel is because the parent themselves are unconscious, right? They have not had a proper model of being a mother or a father, right? They don't know how to model, they don't have a good role model, so they are unconscious themselves. So they are coming from a sense of lack and incompleteness. So what does Eckhart say in chapter 4 of identification with roles? When we are identified with our role, then we end up doing this act of deriving a sense of self-esteem from a child. So what we do, what the unconscious parent will end up doing is the child is seeking approval. And now this child is 30, 40, 50 years old, right? Whatever. The child is seeking approval. Do you all think that when the parent turns away from the child, right, withdraws their love from the child, right? The child did something. Maybe the expectation was they were deriving their sense of self from the child and expecting straight A's. Now you got C's, right? Now you're going to get a disapproving look from, like my mom used to beat me up for getting a grade. Like if I got less than 95 or 99, I would either be terrorized with a lot of scolding, or I had to get 90 and above, right? So when they withdraw, so to me, it's like a withdrawal of their love, right? So then now she's not talking to me because I turned in my report card, and my report card, I was not top of the class, I was second in class, or I was third in class, right? I was always out of the top 4 people in my class, but just because I was third and not first, now she's withdrawn her love from me, right? So do y'all think that that is because they themselves did not have self-esteem? So now they're trying to derive it from me, right? I'm giving this example. April, do you want to talk about this? Expound on it. I kind of gave a little bit of a description, but I feel that's what's happening. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely think that that happens, and I think it is still happening. For me, my children definitely woke me up out of that. Oh man. I think that when we have these children, and when I had, I had these children, I had this brand new baby, this cute, adorable brand new baby. But what I didn't realize is I had also all these expectations with this brand new baby. I had all these hopes and all these dreams and all these aspirations with this brand new baby that, and with each child, I think you do that. And that for me was probably, it was probably some of my more painful lessons, to let go of that expectation, to let go of that. And it wasn't necessarily grades. Like for my girls, I always said, we need to at least be passing. We need to at least have C's. If we can do better than that, that's great. But we need to at least, even if you didn't get everything right, but you at least turned everything in, you would get a C. Like we need to have some effort, right? But I think I had more expectations on, like in my family, there is a perfectionist thread that runs through my family. And so it wasn't that I really wanted my children to be perfect, but it was more that I wanted to be the perfect mom. So do you see it? So I was okay if my girls weren't necessarily perfect, but then like when they got in trouble, it was like, they're going to look at me and think that I wasn't a good mom. That's what's going to happen, right? Yeah. So, and those are some awesome lessons, because I had to let that go, and I had to realize that those were my expectations. Those were my thoughts, my ideas. Those were my standards. And my standards were based off of my parents' standards and society standards of how I should be and how my kids should be and how they should turn out. And I think that still happens a lot. You guys, sometimes it just literally floors me when I work with clients, and we're talking clients at 60 years old or so, like they're up there, getting up there in their age, and they still have the belief that I am no good because my dad didn't like me. Like it just floors me that, like Eileen said, we hold this forever. This idea, what our parents think about us, is so vitally important. And it's so amazing to me that we do this. But I think there needs to be a balance that we have to find in the world, because I think the idea back then was that we had to raise these children this way to live up to our expectations so they would be good people in society. And if we didn't, then they would be this bad person on the street, this bum on the street. But where is the balance, right? So if we allow them the freedom to express themselves, to be, you don't have to do math, you can just do art, or you can just do music. Where is the balance in that? And I think that's where we're headed. I think you brought that up last time too. So, but yes, I have experienced that myself in my own life. I have experienced having expectations and having to let those go. And when you do let those go, then you move into the space of unconditional love, which is where we're supposed to be. That each person is unique and is individual and needs to be loved on their own basis, not on society's basis, not on my basis. I have a current family member who is living out their dream of sports through their child currently, as we speak, is doing that. And I mean, the child's in 3 to 4 sports a week. That's a lot, right? That's, you know, because that parent has that expectation, they're living through the child. And I think it's just, it's not a very good road to be on. So I do think it's an issue. I think it's something that we need to work on. We need to change in the society.
And
Yeah,
when the child fails, then the parent feels that they've failed, right? So the whole
Yeah.
failure is not so much as they're withdrawing their love because they don't love us. It's more like because their self-esteem is associated with our success. The moment
right.
we fail as a child, then they feel that their self-esteem has gone down. So they blame, they're disappointed. It's not like they're disappointed in us, they're disappointed in themselves.
Yeah, I did that with my girls. When my girls did some things, then I blamed myself. Like I wasn't a good enough parent. I didn't do a good enough job. And this child that I'm talking about in the family is 7 years old. And if the child
Oh,
doesn't get
wow.
first place and get second, the child's not happy with himself.
Crazy, crazy.
Yeah. So
Thank you so much, April, for that example, because it brings me, I think it was really, I'm grateful for that lesson because Oprah started interviewing Agassi. If anybody knows Andre Agassi, who's the tennis player, right? Um, and he was a world-class tennis player. And Andre Agassi said he never wanted to play tennis. His dad pushed him to play tennis, and he excelled at tennis, then went through depression. So he was addicted to prescription drugs until he was 30 years old, and then wrote a book about it, right? That's why Oprah interviewed him. So after that story, I'm like, every kid, go do what you want to do. I don't want to push you. I don't want you hung on drugs and prescription drugs or depression. So thank you, April. Eileen, did something come to you about this topic?
All kinds of things are coming to me. Oh, the bringing kids into it is always hard for me because I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher of young children, so I'm a teacher of 9 and 10-year-olds. So I see a lot. I see a lot of things that come down from families, uh, and then trying to change that mindset, that thinking when I'm only with them for a short period of time, and I'm with nearly 30 of them, trying to juggle that and teach curriculum. But yeah, I definitely, sorry, I'm probably getting away from the original question, but what April was describing, just I've seen it. I've seen that happen with students, with kids in the neighborhood, with friends, kids, um, and it breaks my heart. And I've seen in my own family, not anymore so much because I've really worked hard on that, but um, just the expectations and the upbringing that my spouse had, um, and seeing how these patterns and conditioning is kind of in his head and in his mindset, and then he'll say something or he'll do something, and I'm like, that doesn't really jive with how we're raising them. And then we'll have a conversation. Oh, well, that's just the way my parents did it, or that's the way that I was always told, or I was always taught. Um, and so now that I've healed a lot of stuff in my own being, um, we can have more better conversations about it now. And it's not me reacting to something that he's said or he's done or he's expected, because I don't feel like I'm being reactive to what he says or does, more just responding. But it really does hurt watching, you know, things happen sometimes and see things, and just the people not even understanding the harm that they're doing. Because I see it every day.
Making the kid feel that the kid is disappointing them, but it's not the kid that's disappointed. They're disappointed in themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Thank you. Thank you so much. Beautiful. I think Abraham Hicks says, Caesar may have to correct me. Doesn't she say, Caesar, that why are you listening to people about things that did not work out for themselves? And then now you're listening to them. You want to speak to this? Thank you, Caesar.
Sure. Yeah, the expectations, seeking validation for themselves to feel good because of their expectations, of what their child achieves or accomplishes or not, depends on their happiness. And April just hit it on the head again. Thanks, April. Yeah, and it's that, that seeking validation. It's almost like it's, but we as children are almost taught that, in our education system on being competitive and being judged, how the grading system works and so on. And, other kids, oh, he got a D. Well, this kid got an A. Well, guess what? You're both moving on to second grade. And until they figure out that, you can't hang your happiness on anything outside of yourself, then I guess it doesn't matter what you do, because you're going to be subject to that suffering, one, caring what other people think, because that's part of the reason why they need their kids to do good. Maybe they didn't accomplish, sure, I want the best for my children as well. And if my kid ever drops out of college and wants to be a rock and roll star, and knowing that he may or may not fall on his face, and them 6 years of college are for nothing, then hey, that's where life intended you to be, and you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And I'll support whatever he wants to do, so long as he ain't running out there with a crack pipe in his mouth. We got to let our children fly, and then we have to let them fail at times too. You can't coddle your children at 25, 30 years old, because that does more damage than good in the end. I want to get all them quote unquote failures. I want them to experience the hardships and know what it's like to get back up from the fall at a young age, because everybody is going to experience difficulties and tragedies and hardships throughout their life. And if you can grasp that at an early age and understand that it's okay to quote unquote fall down sometimes, it's not about the falling down, it's about the getting back up every single time, 1,000 times over. And it is okay. But when I taught my son at 2 years old to ice skate, I spent probably a couple weeks having him watch hockey, 3, 4 years old, let's say. And every time somebody fell down in the NHL, I would point that out. So he knew it was okay. He wasn't afraid of falling down. It was just part of the deal. And so goes life. We're going to fall down. We're going to have experiences that don't feel good. And your children's successes shouldn't matter to you. And it starts with the simple notion that that child is my child. When the reality is we own nothing in this life. Nothing is ours, including our children. As Eckert says, we have a responsibility when they are young to to feed them and protect them and try to, consciously get them to understand a few things in life. And so when they fly the nest, that they'll be well on their own. And once they fly that nest, what they do is really no longer your business. The type of relationship you have with them, I guess, will determine the, how you may or may not support. I see a lot of people that have great relationships with their children, and I see a lot of people that have terrible relationships with their children. Many of them are because of divorce. But the reality is I got divorced after 20 years, and it took me about a little while to understand that I can still be a great father to my children without being in the house with my ex. And we've had disagreements on, maybe a path or something that the child may or may not wanted to take in life. But again, it has nothing to do with us. That is that child's life. Let them fly. Let them do as they please. As long as they're not putting themselves in harm's way, I think it's important to let that child. And there are no failures in life. That would be your expectation of what success is. What does Eckhart say? Success is nothing more than a peaceful, successful moment. How you measure success shouldn't be on the amount of money you have, or the job, or the car, or the bank account, or the pretty wife, and so on and so forth. It should be, if you are going to measure success, measure it by how much peace you have in your life. That's success. And again, what your children do really has no bearing on your life as a parent, and nor should it. You have your own journey to fly. Concentrate on that. Support your children in whatever they do. And if it's something that doesn't appease you or makes you happy or makes you look like, because Mrs. Johnson's child is a brain surgeon and my child wants to be a starving artist, so what? My kid's going to be happy or not. But if that's what they want to do and they're happy and at peace, I'll take that over the brain surgeon any day. Regardless of the money, riches aren't measured again with the amount of money. It's the amount of joy and peace you have in your life. And if you can sustain that type of joy and peace and pass that along to your children, then I would call that kind of successful. We all want to see our children do good and be, financially independent. Of course we do. However, it is their journey. And it is important just to support them in anything that they do. Drop your expectations of what you think is best for your child and just support them and love them. That is your role. And that's my penny.
2 cents. Thank you so much, Caesar. And what I can say is even Eckhart was never able to convince his parents. Like, his mother was always disappointed in him until he was 49 years old, right? So all his first 50 years of his life, he lived with the disappointment of his mother and father, because he used to have a bicycle. Finally, he rented, or he had a Russian car called Lada, right? Russian-made car. He said it's like one of the cheapest cars ever, and his dad would ridicule him for being in that, leave alone riding around London in bicycle, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I spoke more on the parents' behalf as far as what their expectations should be of their children. I think Kelly's probably going to clean it up with what the child thinks and how it's important for them not to be too concerned with what their parents want.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Caesar. And I think understanding this part, right from April to Eileen to Caesar, that your parent, if you're a child with a resentment towards a parent that was disappointed in you, then you can feel that, oh, they were deriving a sense of self from me. And every time I failed, they felt that like they failed, right? And all their turning away from me had to do with their own self-esteem, nothing to do with me. That's where the compassion lies, right? So Marla, Eileen posted here, what I'm hearing is a description of karma. Am I getting it? Is what Marla is saying, which is true. The karmic action of the mother or father is, or whatever the parent or teacher or whoever your adult in your life that is disapproving you, that soul is presenting you with that lesson, right? That's the karmic action. Then our reactivity is adding on to action, reaction, action, reaction. Our reactivity that they disapproved of us is our reactivity as a child until we come to the spiritual knowledge that we shouldn't have reacted, right? So I will come back to Kelly. Eileen had some point that she wanted to make. Go ahead, Eileen. Thank you.
Just real quick, I realized I even wrote myself a note to make sure I said it, and then I still didn't say it. Because something that came up for me was a lot of this is, or at least in my experience, a lot of this is like that comparison with the other. So it's like someone will say, you know, or like a parent, a certain parent that I know will say, you know, well, so and so did this, or my brother did that, or my family did this, or so and so's kid is playing this sport or whatever. It's like that always comparing to the other instead of just being okay with the person being themselves. And so I don't do that whole comparison stuff, but I do see other people do it.
Beautiful. That's the ego living life through comparison. And Eckhart says when two kids are talking to each other, if one kid says, like one kid's dad has a Volvo and the other kid's dad has a Mercedes, this kid will say, oh, my dad has a Mercedes, and like feel better about himself because his dad has a Mercedes. Then this kid whose dad has a Volvo will say, oh, but I have an uncle who has a Ferrari, right? So somehow upping the other, like one person saying one thing, and it's all mental. Each one is just a thought formation, right? Because having the Mercedes is a thought formation. You're not the Mercedes, or you are not that kid. Like if your kid is becoming a straight A student, doesn't mean that you're becoming a straight A student. That's why, you know, one of the things that I do is when people post these things about, oh, my kid graduated, or I never say you did a good job as a parent. I always congratulate the kid for their efforts. I never ever say, I don't allow the parent to derive their sense of self from their kid in my response. I always credit the kid. I'll say, Meg did an incredible job. Congratulations for graduating bachelor's and then the master's or whatever they do, right? I'll never say, oh, you did so and so, you did a great job as a mother. I will never say that. Out of this one single pointer from Eckhart about how parents derive, and this is in chapter 4 of A New Earth, roles. I think it revolves around roles, and he talks about parents deriving a sense of self from their kids. So I'll let Kelly wrap up because it is, yeah, Kelly is going to wrap it up. Please do. Thank you, Kelly.
The dynamic of transference and using transference as an unconscious path to affect a legacy through children is sort of the more common and the most common interaction between parents and kids, where parents will vicariously live through their kids and use their children and the path their children take to validate their own ego. This is, again, I'm gonna sort of buck the trend and sort of, from a very early age, again, because of my asthma and the lessons I learned because of my asthma and almost dying, I really did not value certain basic things like success in school or having, like, there's certain things that even as an adult, valuing money or material success or wealth is something I do not do in the normal sense. If I can pay my bills and I have a house over my head, I mean a roof over my head, I'm happy. My mom and dad helped me a great deal explore the arts, and I did in university or in college, as it's wont to be called in the States, I did a double major in religious studies and psychology, and then again realized how much politics was involved in getting into the programs that I wanted to get into, marriage and family therapy. I decided that I didn't want to partake of the education system anymore, and I decided I wanted to work. And I wanted to have, to their credit, been very ridiculously supportive. And even like they both chose to raise my brother and I have an older brother, very different though, very, very, very different siblings. I have had the great fortune of having parents who recognize that their parents had patterns and best conscious of transferring as little consciously as possible. And this sort of meant that my mom and dad took a hands-off approach and let my brother and I make up our own decisions about college and university. But my mom and dad both wanted us to go to college and university. And my brother's got his bachelor's in science and stuff like that. And I decided to end my experience in college because I was very disillusioned, and I realized that it wasn't going to make me happy. And this was a huge thing for my mom and dad, because they wanted, they kept telling me, it's like, well, they just want me to be happy. And I'm going, yeah, that's what I'm telling you guys. I recognize that, there's, if I'm going to go to school and be happy, it's going to be doing something that I, that I love, and that will actually, I literally told them it's going to be something that's going to feed my soul and make my heart happy. And, hopefully it'll, also pay the bills kind of thing. And, growing up in a French Catholic setting, in a French Catholic community, and not being French, not being Catholic, I saw a lot of behaviors and sort of dynamics between my friends and their parents that were very, very different than what I experienced at home, and realized at a very young age that there is this transference, there's this expectation, there's this, as Marla was saying, that yes, there's the karma, the way that parents are unconscious as to how they transfer, well, just people in general. It's not even a parent child thing, it's just people are unconscious in general as to how they actually use their awareness, how they actually participate in reality, whether or not it's actual even conscious and active participation in reality. And when you are not conscious, when you are unconscious, you will blindly transfer your issues left, right, and center onto anyone you possibly can, because that's what happens when you're unconscious. You don't know that you're doing it. You don't know that you're throwing your expectations out left, right, and center, because that helps control your external world so that you feel safe, so your ego feels validated. And this is the classic pattern with parents and children. except because of the family bond, it's much more intense. There's much more emotional connection. There's much more direct seeding of karmic patterns, of emotional patterns, of mental perceptions, of limitations, of limited belief systems. Is much more intense. And family, as a result, is also the deepest education, because you feel the pull, you want to be accepted by your family, and you also want to break free of that projection and that transference, and still figure out how to have that connection with your family, which is not easy. Not easy at all. Which is, again, why family is and will always be some of the greatest education and learning experiences any of us will ever have. Even if we have very little family in our life, that's a whole other different kind of learning. But yeah, the investment. Yeah, again, ego investment. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that, Caesar. Exactly. The ego investment that people have in their belief systems causes them to lose the brain when it comes to their kids, and believe that they are entitled. And I give, again, great credit. I'm not saying that everyone is like this, but this is the general pattern. And it is wonderful to hear what everyone has been saying, because this is about us coming together and sharing these concepts that are beyond this normal karmic wheel of unconscious patterning. This is about us coming together and sharing and supporting each other and everyone else who's out there listening and seeing, and understanding that there is more. There is more to the way that we can actually love people in our lives instead of transferring everything onto them. Having having had an instant family, and my partner move in, and having 3-4 kids all of a sudden, teenagers to young adults, and I did not really understand how different how different I am when until one of the first conversations I had with the eldest son about how he realizes that I'm not actually placing any expectations on him. And I went, oh yeah, like why would I? And I hadn't, I hadn't even sort of like realized I was, just holding space for him, because that's what I want to do. I've understood how to do that for me. So for myself and anyone else around me, that's all I want to do. I don't want to, I'm very conscious of having stepped out of a lot of projections, a lot of the ties between my parents and I, in terms of being different and choosing that, not transferring and not projecting outward, and just holding space and being aligned with my heart. And you get so busy just being in that space. And he was like, you're just gonna support me no matter what. I'm like, yeah, even if you're ticked off at me and angry and like throw a chair at me, I'll still love you. Which again, we had this like great amazing conversation. And I get it. I get anger. I get sadness. I used to have a very famous temper when I was a kid. So and I use my anger and my temper to protect me as a kid too. Where I'd yell and shout and make lots of noise and get all kinds of scary as a kid, just to like keep people away from me, right? It's one of the things that we learn as kids, that that's how anger works. That's how projecting emotions work. So when we look at the investment, the ego investment that we have in our realities, family and children are a profound investment. And it is very tricky and very challenging to step back from those attachments and those investments, because our shadow loves to feed off of that feeling of satisfaction. It's just like having like the best pineapple juice, or like fresh mango juice, or bacon or eggplant stir fry, or whatever it's that feeling of immense satisfaction when you see your kid do something. And for a personal point of reference, one of the things that really made me understand how little my family understands all of the training that I've done is when I participated in the International World Sikron tournament that was held here in Winnipeg, I guess about 5 or 6 years ago. And my mom came and watched, and she had never ever seen me do anything, even though I've got like a YouTube channel. She never ever looked at anything. She never ever seen me do any of my stuff. And she was blown away. She was just like, you're an artist. You like, when you said that you're a martial artist, like, you're really an artist. And I'm like looking at her going, oh, she actually saw me. It's like, she actually gets it now. It's just like, I was 40 at the time. So I've been, training for 30 years at this point, or a little over 30 years. And, no one in my family has seen what I do. My nephew came to, some of my classes briefly, but no one's ever come and trained with me. No one knows. So she saw me do my bagua form, a couple of them. And then she also saw me spar. And, it was really interesting to feel and to watch her sort of like change, like in that moment, change her perception of who she thought I was. And it's that thing of like, where no matter what's going on with family and parents, whether or not you are a parent, whether or not you're a child, whatever space you are in the family dynamic, holding space, being able to be aligned with yourself and being present is the most important thing that you can do for yourself. It is the gift that crosses all boundaries, all layers of reality. It is the gift that will transcend absolutely everything. I've witnessed it happen for over 20 years in my family changing their perception of who I am, simply, without having to say anything to them. Like my mom coming to the tournament and watching me express through physical movement a certain skill set, and her reality change. Like I could feel it, see it in her face. It was like this palpable thing where this bubble had just gone poof, where I wasn't her little boy anymore, but I was this martial artist, and I never pushed at my mom and dad. I never pushed at my family. They would push at me, and I would just hold my space. And I would explain, I'd always explain if they asked me questions. But again, it's one of those things, no matter what relationship you have in the family dynamic, if you hold your space, if you center yourself, if you are present emotionally, if you are practicing being mindful, the changes will happen. It's a kind of subtle momentum, like the current in a river, that just builds up over time and erodes those stubborn rocks and those banks and brings the water home to where it needs to be. So the work is the most important thing. It's the greatest gift you can give yourself and everyone else in your family, because being still with yourself erases karma. Being still with yourself erases your karma and your entire family tree karma. You can stop and step out of that wheel of karma. And that's why they talk about the wheel of karma being an illusion. Because when you understand how to choose for yourself that space of stillness and alignment with your heart, you will end patterns. You'll end that transfer of ego validation and ego investment. You will end it. But it takes practice. That's the only secret.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kelly. So in that alignment, we will know that so one of the things that as a child, like if you're 40, 50, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, and you're holding resentment for your parent, they know as a child that when the parent turned away, which in my case, my mother, if she scolded me or really was not speaking to me, when she turned away, her inner being was always loving on me
Yes.
unconditionally.
Yep.
And my inner being, even though I was feeling rejection, was the inner being of each human was loving each other unconditionally. And all we need to do is seek that alignment, that we are having compassion for our parent. And if you're a parent, have that compassion for the child and love them unconditionally. So today, I would say I'm infinitely grateful to all the members that come to the group meditation, because this conversation would not have happened without the conversations that happen during the fearless, courageous conversations, the things that just get like thrown out in during group meditation, right out, and everybody creates a field where there's like a field of compassion, and we just absorb it, whatever comes through. We just absorb it during group meditation. Caesar, you owe us a visit. Travis has visited us a couple of times. You owe us a visit, Caesar. One Friday, you have to show up. So infinitely filled with gratitude for all the group meditators that come in, have these conversations, because of which it creates another layer of creativity here. And we are able to have a really good, I feel it was incredibly amazing, right? The conversation today. So I am blessed. Thank you so much to the panel members. Many blessings to everyone out there, and to all of you. Have a fantastic evening. Take care. Bye. Good night.